Hello there, YouTube. Yes, I am recording on the old software. Yes, my sound may well be out of sync with what's on the screen, but I thought I'd get this video up while I still had it fresh in my mind. That is a response to UJames Forever's response to D. London Cole about the best representatives of humanity in various fields. Again, I think I'm going to be leaving aside the somewhat morbid scenario that D. London Cole came up with originally, and just talk about these people as representatives of humanity in their fields. So we start with architect. Architect, for me, I'm biased, I'm British, I'm a Londoner, and to me, Sir Christopher Wren, I just feel so sorry for him in the fact he had this task of rebuilding an entire city. Not only any city, but what was the largest city and the city of what was becoming one of the most powerful nations on Earth, with several iconic features to it, from scratch. And he did such a good job of it that even on the modern skyline, you can tell a Wren building from a mile off. It's amazing what he accomplished, and it's a great credit to his legacy that they're still there, and that through so much strife that London's been through since, you still have the Dome of St Paul's, you still have various other churches and public buildings that he built up, and he did really well in that field as an architect. I was tempted to mention Brunel and his rather amazing bits of engineering work, but he was, I think, more of an engineer than an architect. So yeah, poet. I'm going to get some stick for this. Yes, Spike Milligan. This may completely ruin my credibility here. Well, I didn't really have much to begin with. I write mildly pornographic role-playing games, so. Yes, Spike Milligan was a somewhat zany character. He was a ridiculous character, and he was very disturbed, but his insight into the human condition in what he calls his serious poems, although I don't know why he calls them that, because as he says himself, they're funnier than his funny poems, is incredible. I mean, one line that will always stick with me is when he's in a mental hospital and he said, "There's a nurse come in, bring me food, they feed me my body well, but they let my mind starve to death." And that line just sends shivers up your spine. Yeah, like you, James, I'm going to pick a Greek playwright, classical Greek playwright, but not a tragedy writer at all. I'm picking a comedy writer, but a comedy writer who was wickedly satirical and didn't just write plays to, like modern comedians, just to have a laugh. Well, to be fair, comedy's coming more back towards the idea of satire, the idea of mocking things that need to be mocked. But this guy was a pioneer. I mean, he was so good at mocking people and doing impressions and generally putting people up to be things that sort of exaggerating people's positions, that his play was used in evidence against the philosopher Socrates in his blasphemy trial. He was that good. People didn't get the joke, unfortunately, and they didn't get the serious bit of the joke either, which I can totally empathise with. He's interesting gent when it comes to looking into his attitudes to war, his attitudes to feminism even. My Sisterita, which sounds like something I would have come up with for one of my games, but nonetheless, just like those kind of things, it is a very feminist piece of work. It basically comes up with the idea that the women of Greece unite to enforce a sex ban until all the men of Greece make peace with each other, which is an absolutely awesome idea. It's very, I admit it's probably very badly written. It is written by a man. And what's even more disturbing is that all the parts have been played by men. And there are scenes in it which are, I think, very sort of, I wouldn't say misogynistic, but ignorant of how women work and how they talk to each other and things. But it is a very, very clever play. There's a lot to say about gender politics and a lot to say about war. Novelist. This is a tricky one, but I'd have to go with Douglas Adams. Again, he's a comedy writer, but again, he's a comedy writer with a real insight into humanity. I mean, I don't agree with everything he said, but when it comes to pointing out the ridiculousness of particular logical positions and the way his mind works in such a sort of absurd way to run counter to what would seem like common sense, but still remain logical, is amazing. And plus, he writes a good pratfall as well. So, what more could you ask for? Composer. Well, I don't know that many composers, to be honest. But there's this composer, it's a Russian guy. Somebody's going to put me up on my ignorance here. He's a Russian guy. He wrote, he was a Soviet defector. And he wrote a sort of musical play, well, not a musical like we know musicals, but a play to music based around the Russian fable of Peter and the Wolf. And it was designed to teach kids how each part of an orchestra worked, and he was wonderful at it. He did an audio introduction to the orchestra using Peter and the Wolf, and it was brilliant. I mean, as a child, remembering that little piece, and the hearing his voice casually explaining how we're going to get this sound from this instrument, this sound from this instrument, and when we put them all together, they end up in this great big soundscape. He wrote an oboe solo. How do you write a flipping oboe solo? It's just ridiculous. Again, he wasn't exactly a sort of he was mainstreamish, but he wasn't mainstream in his way of thinking. He was way out there, and I can really relate to that. Vocalist. This is another one that's going to get in. Bill Oddie. Bill Oddie, you probably won't know him as a vocalist, actually. At the moment, he's mostly doing his nature programs, where he does bird watching and looking at other animals and things like Springwatch. He's recently left Springwatch, or left the sinking ship, to put it frankly. But he did start as a musician with the Cambridge Footlights. He was briefly involved in various comedy acts, including Frost Report, then The Goodies with Tim Brooke Taylor and Graham Garden, which he did all the music for. But his singing, his dancing, he's just summing up sort of the ridiculousness of life and sort of the general, all sort of stupidity that you get with music, or not just the music, but within um, sort of the cult of the stage to start with. Yeah. What else we got other down here? Painter. Ah, Painter. Well, I'm not sure about Painter, but when it comes to sort of general sort of um, artists um, working on sort of 2D, I'd have to go with Paul Dini. Paul Dini was the creator of the Batman, well, co-creator of the Batman animated series, and since he's been involved as a writer and as an artist for DC Comics. He is also the creator of my favourite supervillain, Harley Quinn, because he's not the greatest artist I've seen out there. There are far more skilled, even within comic books, there are far more skilled artists. But when it comes to sort of getting the job done and getting the the sort of feel of a character or a situation, you get so much subtlety in what appears to be so simple. A lot of Japanese anime reminds me of Paul Dini because of the way it does the same thing. It seems simple on the surface, but you look deeper and there's more to it. Then we have director. Terry Gilliam. By far Terry Gilliam. This guy started as the off-screen Python and has ever since gone on to do so much more with his career, and his versatility as a director in that he's been involved in, as well as sort of your typical comedy projects like Brazil, or as it was supposed to be called, 1984 and a half, and other things along that line, Time Bandits, but as well as that, he was also involved in some very sort of high up, what I'd call high art films. The most mainstream of which is probably 12 Monkeys, which was based on a French art film of the 1960s, a Godard film, I believe, called La Jetée. And the spin he brought to it and the performances he got out of Brad Pitt and Bruce Willis were incredible. I've never seen anything like it. I mean, he even got, what's his name? The original Arthur Dent, Simon something. Simon Jones, that's him. Yeah, Simon Jones he got. Whereas Simon Jones tends to play somewhat the same character in everything he's in. He was playing somebody totally sadistic and totally unlike anything he'd played before or since. Rather than this sort of confused English gentleman that he tends to turn up as, and it was a really different side to him, and getting that performance out of him must have been some doing. Yeah, and and when it comes to photography, I'm not really sure. There's so many great photographers out there, both of the human world and the natural world. And to me, to pick one to represent everybody, I mean, with it, it's very difficult, but I'm leaning towards Simon King. He's he's one of the Springwatch. He used to be one of the Springwatch team, but he's a wildlife photographer, and the way he composes a shot, and he takes so much meticulous care in getting sort of, he can almost anthropomorphise animals. you can see kind of like human expressions in animals that just do not have anything near our range of facial expressions. I mean, this is a guy who can actually make an orangutan look happy, so yeah, he's incredibly talented, and yeah. So that's my list. I probably made a right mess of this, but I thought I'd give it a go as a little shout out to James. And just to remind you, his book is on sale. I know one of you has managed to buy the print copy. That's great. Still, well, maybe a few more sales before we consider going for the novella and the novel and so on and so forth. But yeah, links to that below, links to everything below. Have a nice day.